about that. I don't know what is wrong with my camera these days. I'm just going to go right back over here, over to my YouTube, and I'm going to share where we are. Okay. We're going to go here. Let's see, your channel. Okay, part 3. I'm going to share this one on YouTube. I mean on Facebook. Welcome back. I don't know why it clicked off. It just does that. So I'm going to share this one really quickly. Post. Maybe next time I should start doing it on my computer. I don't know. Telephones. Maybe in some future date, the people who make telephones are going to be ending up in hell up to date. Maybe that's what it is. Anyway, without further ado, my darlings, welcome back. Here we go yet again. All right. Most of the tramps hail from little mosquito-bitten state of New Jersey, said the burly demon who had followed me down and was making himself agreeable with the evident design of getting his name in the newspaper. That, said he, pointing to a spot where the ripples spread wide their coils, that is the soul of tired Timothy of Trenton, New Jersey. Yonder is wayward Huskins, who had an enviable reputation of never doing a day's work in his life. That bald brow, whereon the snake feeders are dancing ring around the rosy, is pent-up Peters of Duluth, the wildest, wittiest tramp of trampdom. Many more were pointed out to me, whose names I do not now call to mind. Some whom I saw were immersed as high as to their eyebrows. Others showed nothing but a foot or freckle. Long did I sit and watch them, as the demons would turn on the hose when they least expected it, or pull them out and scrub them. One reechy vagrant from Akron, who arrived while I was there, fell into a swoon on seeing a cake of soap for the first time. It was pathetic. Having successfully surmounted some hindrances and inspected the new incline railroad, which is now in full working order, I followed the direction of the signboard pointing to the gulf where society bores are punished. The society bores, and there are many of them in hell, are not having what would be termed on earth a glorious time. They were all there, however. The man who continually talks about himself was there, the man who tries to act funny in company and makes an indecent fool of himself was there, the man who is always flattering other men's wives was there. There were others too, all being sat upon by industrious demons who worked diligently and happily, boring deep holes into their poor wretches with brace and bit or post-hole augers. Hugging the rocky ledge closely, I groped my way to a lower plane where I discovered new torments. Everywhere was great activity. It is said that this dependent exacts more careful attention and employs more demons than any other in this region. I found the large and populous Chicago branch to be the most interesting. These brutal aldermen who, on earth, ever that their hearts burn with passionate desire to serve the people, and then forthwith go to serving with impassioned energy and corruption, that will give up to them, they are shoveled into the separate ovens of the big furnace, which winds around the hill in a semicircle arrangement, similar to that of the desks in Chicago City Council. Each sat in his particular oven, not only burning at heart with sympathy for the constituents, but burning all over and swearing till the blue air, mixing with the bright red flames, made a highly striking picture. At intervals, the aldermans would break out with remark that it hadn't been for the newspapers, they would not be suffering this injustice. Some are tough and some are tender, but the demons spare none. The fat and the lean, the beautiful and the thug-faced all go together in democratic simplicity into this sizzling, broiling barbecue. If on feeling of the breastbone of a new arrival, it is found that he is uncommonly tough, he goes into the Chicago department as a matter of course. New York City compares favorably with Chicago in furnishing thoroughbred boodlers. Pittsburgh sends some pretty bad ones. And I was told that Cleveland, Ohio had a showing of aldermans in hell that could compete with almost any, not in numbers, but in general moral, mental, and physical dilapidation. On my way out, I passed the furnace where those from Providence, Rhode Island were roasted. It was a very sad sight, but somehow I did not feel like soiling a new handkerchief with fresh tears. Perhaps I felt as the average taxpayer must feel when he reads this, that hell is a rich joke on the alderman. Now, I began to hear below me a terrible noise. The yelling of voices deep and hoarse made up a tumult that cleft the Stygian darkness like the roaring of the herd of leviathans. Following the direction of the noise, I soon discovered that I was in the eternal home of the Board of Trade Gamblers. Into a huge pits, or corners, as the demons call them, these bulls and bears are hurled headlong. There, they began speedily to realize that Mr. Satan can run a tight corner himself, a tighter corner than they were ever in or ever pushed anyone else into. No mercy is shown them. 15 deep, they are piled in and squeezed as wet clothes are squeezed in a wringing machine. The flames from an adjacent well of natural gas rose high above the opposite wall and threw a flickering red light about this department, plainly disclosing these animals in all their mad revelry. My phone is slipping down. Sorry, darlings. I need a better clip. Hold on just a second. There. No, that's okay. I'm gonna leave it. Anyway, where were we? Looking down there, I'll go back a little bit. The flames from this adjacent well of natural gas rose high above the opposite wall and threw a flickering red light about this department, plainly disclosing these animals in all their mad revelry. Looking down the jaws of the pit, I saw directly below me a large man who seemed so utterly whelmed in woe that pity burst the dam of my visage, and I dropped a large, lustrous tear on his bald head as a token of my sympathy. As I was leaving the Board of Trade Gamblers, I looked up and saw a tribe of smooth, oily-looking sinners coming down the slope and gibbering in low, guttural tones, while a Gorgon policeman cracked a long whip and drove them on from the rear. These individuals, I was informed, were the Bunko steerers. I followed the procession long and faithfully, as a small boy will follow an Italian with a bear, not because there is any fun in walking, but because there's certain to be free show. I was not disappointed. Climbing a steep hill, the procession halted where there was already a howling pandemonium of hopeless souls. I mounted to the summit of the small precipice and looked over. Running from the top to the bottom of this hill was sandpaper slide, constructed very much like the regulation toboggan slide, though not for the amusement of the sliders. The slide punishment is dealt to the bunco steerers for various reasons. It gives the devils a chance to try their own hands at steering, for one thing, and it affords them a good deal of enjoyment. And then, the sandpaper being coarse-grained and rough rubs off that smooth, oily way which is a necessary acquirement of a successful bunco steerer. As they stood in procession, with shivering knees, a demonic policeman would at certain intervals yell, "Next!" The one foremost would then shuffle to the front, where he would receive a shove which would send him whirling and rasping down the slide at a fearful rate. Those who have rubbed a big Bermuda onion on a nutmeg grater will easily imagine the fluency with which the slider wept. Farmers from Sangamon County, Illinois, as well as those from Essex, New York, Berkshire, Massachusetts, and Ulster County, New York, all of whom are noted for the time-honored custom of being beguiled by these affable tricksters and relieved of their money every time they visit large cities, will be pleased to hear that there is a place of retribution for the bunco steerer. Indeed, there is played upon him a skin game of which he cannot get the combination. Inveterate and Guelphile poker players are stacked up in regular rows like poker chips. A section embracing miles and miles of valuable real estate in hell is used for the stacking of these sinners. That I might get a good bird's eye view of the department, I climbed to the summit of one of the mountains of human souls. Twice my efforts to gain the top were baffled, and I fell down the howling mass all in a heap. I made a third effort, and this time, by taking firm hold of an occasional protruding ear or stout toe, and using great caution, not to step on a smooth-shaven chin, lest I might slip, I succeeded in reaching the top. Then I made the telescope of my hands and looked out over the plain pokerdom. And what a sight was there, my countrymen! The hot wind was blowing strong, the signs rustling and the stacks swung to and fro with a breeze, just as far as I could see. These tangled heaps of humankind reared their lofty peaks to the opaque sky, while the bats swung round them and built nests in their whiskers. The pile on which I stood heaved and tossed so wildly that I thought it best to crawl down and set forward for the next department. Coming to the spot where the plane of pokerdom ends abruptly and descends in an almost perpendicular steep, thousands of voices arose from below. They were female voices. I looked down through a thick fog which hovered over the vast plain and saw indistinctly a large square of battlements surrounding what I afterward learned was the Department for the Punishment of Women. Women who step off the streetcars backwards. The woman who has her husband do her housework when he ought to be attending his own business. The ubiquitous borrower for church funds. The feeble-minded woman who publicly flaunts affection for her husband. Women who lavish their affection on poodle dogs. Domineering hired girls, saucy telephone girls. The woman who pounds her husband with a broom when she should take an axe. All these, are numerous others, find warm berths in the devil's domain. Passing my solitary way down the steep, with both hands and feet doing active service, I drew near to the entrance, where the rabble of voices now sounded like several sewing societies in joint caucus. I saw a notice over the door, "Gentlemen must keep out." I made an effort to sneak in, notwithstanding, but was detected by a coy she-goblin who guards the entrance, and who whisked me out with suddenness that makes me dizzy. that makes me dizzy to think of even now. Not entirely disheartened, I wandered around the wall, and while no one was looking, climbed up a steep ladder and carried on a little harmless flirtation with a fair-haired sinner over the wall. As, oppressed by the gloom and terror, I wandered down to the fearsome pit beneath the female department, with my eyes still fixed upon the lofty battlements, the heart drumming against my ribs. I heard a weird, sepulchral voice ring out, "Say, mister, lift your feet." I turned and saw before and underneath me a lake whose frozen surface seemed like glass, as frogs peep croaking above the wave, so countless spirits, blue, pinched and frigid, stood shrined in ice. At the side, a perpendicular wall of ice arose as a bank rises from the riverside. From this wall, also, there peered heads whose chattering teeth sounded like the monstrous music of the horse fiddles. Referring to my guidebook, I found that this was just the punishment of those heartless, unsympathetic, and uncharitable men whom one meets in every community, and whose characters might be best described by the word cold. Walking on a space, I found one that my feet, who seemed apart from his throng, but was none the less grief-stricken. He lifted his head with a blood-freezing crackle of the neck joint. I stopped low and sympathetically asked him what he had done to deserve such treatment. He answered, "Sold ice," and I knew that there was that fortunately almost extinct species of mercenary ice dealer who brings little chunks of ice to the customer's door and charges 3 times their value. I began to see that I would have a case of chilblains to nurse if I didn't hurry from the place, so I skated out. I next descended a path leading to the left and sought to explore the depth wherein all searching justice dooms to punishment the agile bank cashiers and all men who have at any time during their lives shouldered other men's money and skipped to countries where they fear no extradition. I had not journeyed long over the uncertain steps of stone when, from a sharp turn in the Alp-like slope, I saw great volumes of fire shooting and swaying in the far-off gloom. The peaks of distant mountains showed black against the glare. The caloric was now intense. Looking up, as a wide rift opened in the whirling smoke, I saw beyond the spirits of the bank cashiers, still forever skipping, still forever chased by Satan's private police. On they came, clattering like mountain goats, leaping and tumbling from crag to crag. On their shoulders big bags of stones, far heavier than any boodle, and in their hearts great chunks of sorrow. On and on they skip eternally. There is no American detective behind the lost sight of them and give them cease of suffering. Pushing blindly downward, I suddenly found myself environed by a damp atmosphere. Downward to the left, I came upon the men who are given to falsehoods, particularly men who were fond of telling fish stories. These sinners are hung upon fish hooks over boiling lake, where through the long hot ages, they writhe and squirm like fretted fishes jerked from the calm delights of placid pool. Some hung by the ears, others by the back. Another was swinging with unstudied grace by the heel. Approaching one who hung uneasily above, I looked up and asked him whether he was sorry he had come. He muttered something about its being no sinecure, but as I was about to go away, he called me back and asked how the fishing was up around the Mackinac lakes. Though at this time, nigh existed with the vicissitudes of my journey, I kept right on, determined to see everything. Some people, as I could plainly see, were going to stand this thing throughout eternity. I ought to be able to hold on a little longer. The sewers of hell are flushed with patent medicines. Wallowing in this stream of mysterious decoction are the souls of the quack doctors, gulping their own poisons. To add the punishment, unceasing showers of large pills descended, the doctors frantically beating the air in their endeavors to ward off the bitter storm. I saw many whose portraits once adorned the advertising columns of daily press, but they slunk away on seeing me as the water rat seeks the darkness of the mud bank. One of them, who had been trying to gnaw free lunch out of the head of a rival, looked up while I stood on the rock above them, wiped his moustache on the other fellow's head, and cried out, "Say, did you ever take anything for it?" "For what?" I asked. "Why, man, you've got incipient etulation on the cerebellum." "Thanks," said I, and walked off. I don't know just what the etulation malady may be, but if I may have it, it will probably be trouble again enough of itself without being complicated with patent medicines. Down in a gloomy vale, where the hot miasmic breeze rankles, in your nostrils like the odor of lowly restaurant, I discovered the Kentucky kernels. I take so credit for the discovery. Anyone who visits hell and fails to run against officers from the bluegrass country must be an expert dodger. And here they were, up on the mountainsides, down in the chasms, everywhere writhing, cavorting, and galloping. Each colonel wears a pair of boots which are well fitted with large snakes. These are his permanent property. In case he loses any, the demon overseer will yell, "More snakes!" and immediately another hoodful is sent up from below. The horrible scenes witnessed at every turn now begin to unnerve me. As a fluttering feather drops to lowland from the weary wing of a Jim Crow wheeling over the mountain crest, so my heart sank lower and lower till I dropped to the ground in stupor of extreme melancholy. Aroused by the heavy boom of gas pipe bursting on the opposite hill, I arose and pushed aimlessly on my way, presently finding myself in the midst of the great fat frying industries of this region. Seated in large frying pans, the monopolists and the pompous rich vainly fan themselves, while the slow eternal fires gradually fry the fat out of them. I passed slowly in front of them, and they sat there hissing and bubbling. They eyed me sharply, evidently wondering how I happened to be there in the garb of earthly mortals. One steaming soul before whom I halted wiped his brow with a ragged stock certificate and asked me if I could tell him what Union Pacific was quoted at. I told him I did not know, whereat he seemed very sad. Then, the heat becoming more intense, his corpulent person flopped in the pan, head down, as popcorn jumps with the heat. Walking on a space, and wondering how a little facetiousness would strike the unfortunateness, I asked one of the number, who was already done, quite brown, if it was hot enough for him. It did not work. Immediately, a score or more of demons shot down from the black sky and, grappling me with hooks, hurled me down a deep chasm, a distance of several hundred feet. An age, it seemed before me, I recovered. An age, it seemed, before I recovered reason, when, standing in the abyss where stifling vapors drifted thick on all sides, my ear caught the sound of strange metallic mutterings, seemingly coming from a distance. But looking up, I saw a sight that made me stand aghast. There, right before me, along the barren rock, sat a brood of pensive souls, crouching before an endless row of phonographs. Sermons I used to inflict on the public was the inscription placarded on each machine. In front of them, there passed every few moments an industrious demon taking up a collection. It needed no reference to my guidebook to place these unhappy people, the ministers who never know when their congregations have had enough, passing warily up and actively dragging one foot, then the other, as one might haul two reluctant children. I at last reached the summit. Where is my page? Is that one page? I at last reached the summit, which I looked into a large enclosure and saw a mode of punishment that Judge Minos, in his severest mood, metes out on the professional pugilist. The sluggers were holding glove contest with the most powerful of the demons. Some of them fought vigorously for a moment, but in the end they all succumbed. As the demons wore gloves covered with short iron spurs, and the pugilists had only the regulation mittens, with 8 ounces of padding, the contests were rather one-sided. One pugilist was receiving particularly heavy punishment. "Who is that unfortunate?" I asked. "Someone who has fought innumerable times." "No," replied one of the demons. "He didn't fight at all. He just issued challenges." I was now in the very bottom of the region of the lowest depth, and was about to retrace my steps, congratulating myself that it was all over, when I became aware of constant muffled rumbling, as of some ponderous machinery. At regularly recurrent intervals, the rumbling was broken by a loud swat, which sounded like a man spanking a cheese with a scoop shovel. Walking over in the direction of the sound, I found myself in the department where the chronic kickers reap the bitter reward of their pessimistic lives. The mechanical kicking machines used here are perhaps the most valuable labor-saving devices in hell. The following facts I culled from the tourist guide given me by Mr. Satan. Each machine is so constructed that it resembles a huge mule. 82 of these mules constitute one large machine. Each mule is capable of getting in 76 kicks per minute, and the entire force at work has a capacity of 6,232 kicks every 62 seconds. It was an impressive sight. The chronicle kickers were swung off precipitous rock and allowed to hang down just far enough to get the brunt of the mule's heels as they swung up. Some of them, through force of habit, vainly try to kick back. In latter stages of my weird journey, I had begun to grow aweary of darkness. Now I pined for the light of the upper world. A big, brawny demon with a forked tail and a noisy respiration, like the sniffle of a captive boar, stood in the path as I shambled toward the elevator. I passed behind him, hoping I would not be seen. As a windfall's wheels veer at sudden gust of air, he turned and swooped upon me. I cowered in the darkness of the rocks, but he caught me quite easily. A strong hand clutched my coat collar. There was a convulsive jerk, a sound of hissing air, brakes, and general commotion around me. "Get off," I screamed, and then terrific shake unsettled the lethargy, and opening my eyes, I saw the conductor standing over me. "All out for Chicago." "Chicago," said I. "Great Serendipitous. I thought this was hell." That is the end. Thank you, darlings. I hope you enjoyed that book. It is funny, and it goes on human nature, and it says that it's okay to wish punishment upon people who wrong you. I think it's a brilliant book. Anyway, darlings, if you enjoy this, thank you so much. Thank you for all the likes, the comments, the shares. Make certain to comment down here below. If you like this book, leave a message down here, down here. It's almost up here because the camera's too high. Anyway, I'll sit up. If you enjoyed it, share. If you are enjoying the channel, hit the like, subscribe button, ring that notification bell. Also, you can find me on patreon.com / The Gentleman Psychic. So join me there on Patreon. Join me on PayPal under rlillard6@gmail.com or on Venmo at Richard-Lael Lillard. Anyway, my darlings, next week, I have a book for you for next week. Next week, we continue our satanic journey through hell. And I have another 19th century novel. This one is The Sorrows of Satan. I guess I didn't need to get the book to show you that. But anyway, next week we've got The Sorrows of Satan. We will start that novel. All right, darlings. I love you. I appreciate you. Oh, find me on thegentlemanpsychic.com for readings too. That's a great way to support. Anyway, I love you. I will chat with you later on. And thanks for watching.